Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I have a few things that I, kind of regularly do throughout the week. I don't have a ton of like big things going on, but I figured that it would be fun to also show like the more chill side of plant chores, because in my last plant chores video, I did a lot of propagating and chopping and propping and doing all that kind of stuff. I really hardly ever do that kind of stuff for plant chores. Usually it's just watering and maintenance. So we're gonna do a little bit of a plant maintenance vlog. And we're gonna start with watering my greenhouse cabinet because I haven't watered it in a couple of days, and I typically have to water it, let's see, probably about every 5 days. And I have a bunch of new plants in there and just some plants that are like growing, and I wanna keep an eye on them. So we're gonna do a little bit of a watering sesh in there. So this plant has been recovering from mite damage, and it has some super knobby growth, as you can see, but it does have new stuff coming in. Anytime I water it, I'm just spraying it down with like a strong bead of, not a strong bead of water, but like a strong stream of water to hopefully continue knocking off those mites. I have been also treating it with the sulfur, but after some chats with Adam and actually only Adam, he suggested just spraying it down with the water and seeing if that have the same results. So I'm gonna do that for a while and see what happens. Hopefully it will continue to grow. It does look pretty good, but something else that I changed up is, this is my forgetii, and it put out this leaf. It got a little crunched because of low humidity, but it is a pretty big leaf and the color is really nice and dark. But I put sphagnum moss around the base of these. This is basically like, the new leaf would come up through here somewhere. And since it just put out a new leaf, I'm not really expecting it to put out another one too soon. But this just will help keep the humidity up like in this area. I've had several people suggest I do it, but I just didn't have sphagnum moss like on hand to do it. So we're gonna try that. I did that with all of my Anthurium that I already had. So we're gonna see if that makes a difference for them. Actually haven't unwrapped, or let's say hadn't unwrapped, all of these plants from like the soil cover that was on them to keep all the soil in. So I just did that because obviously we were gonna water, and this leaf has gotten so big. I knew that it was still like not hardened off, but I didn't realize that it was gonna keep growing. And it's honestly so beautiful. I'm really happy that they sent this home with me. This was one that Josh from Ecuagenera was like, I think that you should just have this plant. So I was like, okay. So I'm really excited about this one. Again, this is the Anthurium Bessiae luxurians cross. It's really, really pretty. I removed all the top stuff off. This is the Draconopterum, and these are all new plants to me. So if I'm butchering the names, sorry. And then this is the Magnificum crystallinum cross. It's looking very beautiful. It actually has something coming up, like this like new leaf situation is already looking very stiff. So that's very exciting. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll get something. And then this falcatum, again, don't think I'm really saying that correctly. This is the new leaf that you saw in that video. It was literally like this big, and now look how huge it is. It's so beautiful. It has like such a beautiful T shape. I'm completely obsessed. It's gorgeous. I knew that this plant was gonna be a big favorite of mine. Like when I saw it, I just immediately knew that I needed to have that plant. So as far as bringing all of these plants like into my collection and integrating them, I had them sit in the plant room, just sort of isolated for like probably 5 days. And then a couple days ago, I put them in the cabinet because I was thinking like the plant room humidity is probably like 30%, like it's really not that high. And I know that they were living in around 50 to 60% humidity, just because we were chatting with Josh and he was explaining how it can be hard to keep the humidity up there. So the cabinet is usually around 50 to 60% humidity. It has been a lot higher since I put like so many more plants in there, which has been really awesome because it's actually been sitting around like 68, 69%, which is really ideal. I mean, if it would go up into the 70s, I'd be even happier, but that's way better than where it normally sits in the winter, which is like 40, sometimes down to 30. So it tends to be like 10 to 15% more humid in there than the rest of my house. And I'm not supplementing humidity at all. So I sort of think to myself like, well, I sort of started to notice that when the humidity drops, that's when the plants actually need to be watered. And it makes sense. Like obviously there's not water in the soil anymore, like making the air moist. So I just sort of gauge the humidity levels. And today it's at 62%, which is the lowest that I've seen. And I checked the plants and a lot of them were dry. I'm kind of just going off of that for my greenhouse cabinet. If you have a closed environment, maybe that would be a helpful tool for you. Of course, like check the plants first to make sure that they actually need water before you water them again. I always say that, but I have sort of gotten into a habit of like, oh, once the humidity drops, they're probably ready. And if it's been a couple of days, like again, as I said earlier, it's about every 5-ish days that I have to water in there, which can sound like kind of a hassle, but there's not that many plants in there. Like I'm used to watering sessions being as big as the entire plant room. That's like 50 plants. That's a lot of time. So if it only takes me like an hour, less than that actually, I'm totally happy. And also something that I do is I don't let them drain out for very long because the water that accumulates in the saucers is only a tiny bit anyway. So I don't have to worry about them completely like dripping out like I would with the wall, for example. I don't want to have water dripping down onto the floor or onto the furniture below, which I have had some water damage on that IKEA bench that I'm going to be addressing sometime in a video. But yeah, so I just don't worry as much about water dripping in here because it's metal and there's a ton of plants in there. And honestly, it's just like, it'll evaporate pretty quickly because there's so much light going on in there. These plants have like a little, I don't want to say flimsy plastic planter, but it's just like a, you know, it doesn't have a lot of structure to it. So I'm just gonna kind of like squeeze out anything like this feels like too excess. And then I'm gonna go pop this back into the cabinet. I think with these plants being watered, the humidity is going to possibly go into the 70s. I'll let you know if it does. But when I put them in there, just what was like residual in the pots was bringing up the humidity so much. And I know that it was the addition of these that made that difference because I've had the same plants in there for like, you know, probably like a year, and it was always doing the same thing. And then I added these and it was suddenly so much more humid. So I think also just having more plants in it helps too. So the more packed your greenhouse cabinet is, possibly the more humid it's going to be. Oh, and I also wanted to say, I ordered pots for these and I'm hoping that they arrive sometime while I'm filming this video. I need to check on Etsy the shipping notification, but I wanted them to be in like a, not a terracotta planter, so that would be either ceramic or plastic. And I ended up finding these 3D printed pots that look really, really cool. Like they're like really fun shapes. And some of them, I think I ordered one that is in like a terracotta color, and then one that was white and another one that I think is green. And they're all 6-inch pots because I decided that I want these to be in like larger pots. The root systems and a lot of these are pretty much filling up this, and this is a 4-inch pot and it's pretty deep for a 4-inch pot, so I figured a 6-inch would be a pretty good upgrade size. So I just didn't really like love the idea of getting like a ton more ceramic ones. I went to Walmart to just shop because if you didn't know, well, not right now, but maybe in a few weeks or a few months, Walmart has a really great pot selection. I had no idea until I went a couple months ago, and well, let's say last season, it wasn't a couple months ago. Last season I went and I was blown away by how many beautiful pots there were. There was so many beautiful pots and they're priced really well. I mean, it's Walmart. So anyway, I went to Walmart to see if I could find anything, but I couldn't find anything that I really loved besides one planter, and I'll show it to you. Yeah, I'll show it to you when I'm watering the bottom half of the situation here. But anyway, so when I got back in the car, there wasn't really much at Walmart besides like that one pot. And so when I got back in the car, I started looking on Etsy and just made an order before I even made it home so that I could check it off my list that I found pots for these beautiful Anthurium. And I'm gonna keep like all of the soil that they originally came with and then supplement with De La Tanks just like around, you know, in the extra space. Because I did chat with Josh at Equigenera, basically just like asking suggestions for what to do for soil, being that I am a bit of an underwaterer. Well, he just made me feel better about using De La Tanks with this type of plant, because, you know, I am not a person who's gonna get to watering them every 3 days, and about every 5 days in De La Tanks, they're pretty much drying out, unless it's like a really big one. So anyway, all this to say, they're doing pretty well. This one right here has a little bit of a dead tip. That could be because it broke up here. That could also be because I didn't water it. I forgot that this one is in like a lot of cocoa, like, okay, I'm spilling, but this one is like in a majority of cocoa, whereas the rest of them have more like of a soil peaty base. I don't know if it's probably peat or compost. So I didn't realize that until I noticed the tip, and I was like, oh, something's going on. And then I took off the wrapping and realized that it was majority cocoa and like a little bit of perlite or pumice, it looks like. So that one will definitely need a little bit more heavy amending, but I don't expect to have to do a ton, because these plants, like this type of Anthurium, are typically pretty easy for me. So, okay, I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna put these all back. So this is my Florida Beauty, and it's pretty much reverted. I'm super sad. Like, none of these leaves that have come out recently have any variegation on them. This one's hardened off. Yeah, they don't have any variegation. I'm super bummed. I don't know really what to do, because if I was to cut it back to the last variegated leaf, it would be this one. So like, I guess maybe I could cut it like here, because I think that's what you're supposed to do when a plant puts out a like non-variegated leaves, or you could just wait and see if it starts to put out variegated leaves. I don't really know. I'm not going to be like all that bummed until this big leaf dies. Like, once this leaf is gone, I'm going to be like, okay, let's figure something out here. I don't know if you guys have any tips, let me know. But it's literally under like the brightest light possible in the greenhouse cabinet. Those lights are extremely bright. If you guys saw on my chia pens, it's like a washed out yellowy green color because it's just receiving so much light. So definitely light is not the reason it's not putting out variegation. I don't really know, but this leaf is very cute. I just wish that it was variegated. And I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but I put the moss around, you know, the base of these plants, and like within, like, I just picked this up, and this was not here when I watered like 5 days ago, but it has a new leaf coming out. And this plant does not put out new leaves very often. It looks like, honestly, pretty sad. It's a crystallinum. I've had it for a long time, and it's never like sized up super big. I mean, when I got it, the leaves were like this big. So it definitely has gotten bigger, but it doesn't put out leaves very often. And then they usually end up looking sad and beat up, which I'm actually starting to think is more of a result of the grow lights being too bright. This one is the, what is this one? Oh, the Magnificum Silver. Possibly my favorite plant from the haul. Like, this was the first plant that I saw that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get that one. When I was walking around Equigenera, like, there was a lot that I wanted, but this one was the first one that I picked up and said, I'm getting this. So I'm really happy with it. It doesn't look like there's a new leaf coming in, but it did just recently put this one out. So we'll give it some time, but this is so cool because the stem on this is like square, and I know that in a lot of plant ID and like deciding what plant is what, you can oftentimes look at like the shape of the petiole or like the shape of the stem, and that'll tell you. But this is honestly the first time I've ever really noticed like a difference. Like, this one is definitely a square or a triangle. I think it has 3 sides. Yeah, it has 3 sides. That's just so cool. And then the planter that I found from Walmart looks like this. It's really cool, and it has this drainage hole. It's Better Home and Gardens, and I think it's really awesome. It's actually an 8-inch pot, but you know, it like tapers, so I felt like this would be fine. But I'm gonna put this one in it. I think that'll be really happy. It just needed something kind of tall, and that's the Magnificum Silver. This pot does not really drain out very well, so I always have to just like make sure there's no excess water sitting in it. I'm sure that eventually there is actually excess water sitting at the bottom, and you know, maybe that's why. it's doing so well. I don't know. But I try to drain it out as much as possible. I think with the pots that have the attached saucer, I really, really like them, but I think if there's like, if the pot doesn't have enough of like an angle, I don't know, I think there's something off with the angle of this one. Like it drains into the little holes into the saucer, but not very well. I don't know. I've never really been too concerned about it. I just make sure to like tip the plant really quick just to make sure there's nothing like extra. Now this plant right here, this is my Clarinervium. My very, very happy Clarinervium. It is actually pregnant. I'm gonna show you. So I collected pollen a long time ago and I showed the process of like pollinating this flower, because once the flowers get, how can I show you this without snapping it? As you can see, it has like little wet beads on here, like little water droplets. That is how you know that the flower is ready to receive pollen. So, I mean, I think with this one, it's a much bigger flower. The receiving water, I don't know what it's called. It was all the way up to here, like I waited until it was a little bit more developed. But basically, what you do is you take pollen that you've collected from one of these flowers, and then you just wipe it on like with a paintbrush or something. And then eventually, if it takes, it'll start to take shape and look kind of scary. And then eventually you'll have little seeds that will come out of berries. So not all of the seeds will be viable. There's lots of people who have, maybe not a lot, but there's a few people online who have showed the entire process, which I'm hoping to do. So we're just waiting for this to mature. I think it's going to take a while, but the flower does look different like every couple of weeks. So there's definitely something happening. But pretty much if I let this one go, like I didn't fertilize it or pollinate it rather, it would eventually mature enough to put out its own pollen. And then all you have to do is just like tap it into a little, you know, takeout container, and you can put that in your freezer and you can save it. I don't know for how long. I didn't have to save it for very long when I did it because my Clarinervium flowers a lot, and I actually just used the same pollen from the same plant. But in nature, I don't, like, it's not going to pollinate itself. That just happened because I happened to save the pollen. This plant I repotted a long time ago, and it had root rot pretty bad. Well, not pretty bad. It had the onset of root rot. And I potted it in De La tanks, and that's really what saved it. And I put it in the cabinet, and I just think that consistent humidity really did amazing things for it. Like the leaves just started getting so big, and it was putting out new leaves constantly. So I mean, this was a leaf that it put out when it was starting to feel better. And then as you can see, as it just became more and more comfortable, the leaves got significantly larger. So really big difference. I'm really happy with it. But the newest leaf that it put out was this one, and you can see it's like very tiny, but I think that's because it put out this leaf and this bloom at the same time. And I've been hesitant on cutting this off because I kind of wanted to collect more pollen, but I don't know, like there's a lot of leaves going on here, and I didn't feel like I needed to have like another huge leaf. So I just kind of like let it go, but it is getting kind of tall, like the stem is getting kind of tall, and I'm just like a little bit concerned that if I jolt it too much, like it might snap or something. So I don't know, I think it needs a deeper pot, hopefully soon. I mean, oh yeah, actually, you know what? I can feel roots coming out the bottom. Can you see that root curled up? Okay, so I'm gonna assume it's gonna need to be repotted this spring, because again, it's been in this pot for like probably close to 2 years, because I did that almost as soon as I moved here. So I don't know how that's gonna go, because this is a pretty big pot as it is. This is like a 12-inch pot. So we're looking at a 14-inch pot. So probably gonna switch to plastic at that point to make it not so heavy, because this is already pretty heavy as it is. But yeah, it's been really happy, and I'm very pleased with the transformation. I have my moisture meter right now because I watered this in the last time I watered, and usually I'll water this one every other time I water the cabinets, like every 10 days. But I've never thought to get my moisture meter out. I just thought that since it had a big pot, it would hold water for longer. But then I realized, wow, it's probably outgrowing this pot soon. I figured this time I'd grab my moisture meter, and it's reading dry. So I'm gonna water it. That might be why that new leaf came out so small. In addition to the flower situation, like it wasn't getting enough water. I was noticing a little bit of yellowing, but I think it's an older leaf, so it's not like all that concerning. But anyway, when you spend a lot of time looking at your plants, you're gonna notice like subtle differences and changes that they make, and you're like better at adapting and changing their care just when you notice like, oh, that leaf was a lot smaller and oh, it's drying out a lot faster. Maybe it needs to be repotted or something like that. Now we got the 3 kids here. So these are the Monstera albos that I just cut the other day. And I've already had to water them twice because the sphagnum moss is drying out really fast, probably because of the cabinet environment and all of the light. The plant's probably absorbing a lot of light right now and using a lot of energy to start rooting. I really doubt that it is putting off like a root situation, but let's just check this one. Yeah, no root growth so far, which is totally fine. I was not expecting her to have done that yet. And actually when I dig a little deeper into the spag, I can feel that it is moist in there. I'm probably just gonna like sprinkle on some water just to trickle it down a little bit. It doesn't need like a full-on water, but yeah, spag just, whenever it gets to a point where like it's sounding a little crunchy, that's usually when I water, just to make sure that it's staying moist, and then I'll just kind of do like a squeeze around to remove any excess moisture, because I don't want it just like sitting in a swamp, because then it's more likely to rot. And as far as how the leaves feel, they do feel a little frail, but not bad, honestly. I feel like that's kind of normal, especially when you're fresh cutting and you don't have them like immediately in water. I don't know, I wouldn't be like mega concerned about it if they were like it's not droopy. It's just not like crisp like it would be if it was still attached to the mother plant. It's just going through a little bit of a change right now. Okay, so all of the plants are back in, and you can see how full it looks in there. I love the way that this cabinet looks when it's full. It's just so beautiful. And I have to say, I was able to achieve this fullness with very minimal leaf touching. So it is possible. It's very close. Like you can see, it's very close to touching, but they don't touch each other. There are, you know, a few exceptions. This linearis that's propagating is touching this plant here, but I'm not as concerned about that. And then this bloom, the pregnant bloom, is touching the elbow cutting a little bit. But for the most part, things are really not super intertwined. At the bottom, it's a little bit more intertwined just because the clarinervium is kind of big. I don't know, it is possible to have a packed greenhouse cabinet and have it not be, I don't know, have everything on top of each other. If you want to do that, that's fine. I would just say definitely keep up with your systemic and make sure that you are keeping up with pest checking, you know. Before I opened the door to put all of these back in at the bottom, it was up to 71%. And then just in the few minutes of me having the door open, it dropped to like 50 something, and then in the few minutes that I've been speaking, it's now up to 65. So I imagine that it'll go back up into the 70s range, which makes sense because I literally just watered and wet all of that sphagnum moss. I think the moss probably helps bring up the group average too. Yeah, that is the update on the plants that I have in my cabinet. I hope that you enjoyed seeing all of this and how I'm caring for them. This was obviously a very casual video, but not all plant care is like super exciting. A lot of the time it is just watering the plants and checking on them and like making sure that everything's okay. And I wanted to make sure to do like almost like a week and a half to 2 week update on those Anthurium, because a lot of people were really I don't know, excited about it, which I was too. I'm super excited to have them. They're gonna be great. I am very nervous that I'm gonna kill them, but if that happens, you know, it's a plant and it's a lesson. I don't go around just like killing my plants for no reason. So if it happens, I did make a valiant effort to prevent it. Sometimes it happens. I just need to be like nice to myself about it. And as I'm finishing this video, the sun is coming out and it just feels like a good time to wrap it up. So thank you for hanging out with me and just being my plant friend. I will see you in the next one. Subscribe if you're not already so that you never miss an upload. All right, see you later.